and in this video we consider how podcasts provide a great way to listen to a wide variety of recordings. And here's what we'll be covering. Firstly, why listen to podcasts? Secondly, what is a podcast and what general features help us use them? Also, why did I choose BBC Sounds? And we'll go into more detail using examples from there so that you can get good at finding your own listening choices with my podcast suggestions list to help you get started. So then, why listen to podcasts? With podcasts at your fingertips, you can travel to faraway places through other people's words. Find out how famous people achieved what they did. Keep up to date with the latest advances. Be adventurous in your music choices. Enjoy having stories read to you and stimulate your curiosity with interesting topics. However, before learning how to get the most from it, we'll start by defining what a podcast is. A podcast is a series of audio recordings, with each recording in the series being called a podcast episode. A defining feature is that it can be subscribed to, much like you might subscribe to a magazine, and in this way each new episode is delivered to your podcast account whenever it's released. It often has a theme which guides the choice of the topics chosen for that podcast's episodes, and as a result, podcasts can be quite niche or specialist and may build up followers who listen regularly. Often one or two regular presenters talk with guests who have relevant experience of the episode's chosen topic. Different podcasts appeal to different audiences, and their styles vary greatly. Some are quite simple and might involve just a few people chatting about something they're all interested in. Others, however, can be very professional and need a lot more time and money to produce. Podcasts have grown massively in popularity because being available on demand, they're readily accessible. And the wide range of topics covered by different podcasts make it easy to keep up to date, learn about new things, or simply relax. All this can happen whilst doing everyday tasks like going for a run, taking the train to work, keeping up with the laundry, tackling the ironing or other chores, cooking a meal, or doing anything else that doesn't require your total attention. Technological advances now mean that what's needed for recording a show can be relatively simple. A microphone or two, people with interesting knowledge about the chosen topic, and some fairly straightforward skills. In this way, people can soon produce digital audio files that are ready to be listened to in new and exciting ways. The general features of podcasts when viewed on a computer look something like what's shown here. And on a smartphone they laid out similar to this. Bear in mind that the names and icons or symbols used will vary depending on the podcast hosting platform chosen. Also, what we'll be covering in this video applies whether you're using a computer, tablet or phone. However, I'll be showing the computer view because it's bigger. Each podcast episode being played will have the podcast station logo and a small picture called a thumbnail that reflects the podcast's branding or topic. As well as its series title and episode name, it'll show its release date, the length of time it's available for, a brief description of the podcast episode, and a clickable option to read more. A podcast is listened to by moving your cursor to the play button and clicking on it. This then becomes the stop button, and you'll see the time counter increases as the podcast plays. And if, say, you want to jump forward to listen to something that happened later in the show, you can move your cursor to click on the timeline. Using the other icons, you can rewind by the number of seconds shown, jump back to the start, fast forward by the number of seconds shown, or jump to the end of the podcast. And when the volume icon is clicked, you can change how loudly the episode plays. Depending on the podcast hosting company being used, the gear wheel icon provides various settings such as autoplay, for example. When autoplay is selected, the next podcast episode automatically plays when the current episode ends. People often like using autoplay if they're wanting to listen to music continuously. However, when listening to spoken word podcast series, I generally keep autoplay disabled because if there's a possibility I might be interrupted or fall asleep whilst listening, I don't want the following episodes to automatically continue, as it can make it difficult to know where to start listening from again. There's the option to view more of the episodes in this podcast, and to visit its website if it has one. Also, if you decide you want to easily revisit the episode, you can use the bookmark function to add it to your personal choices for possible future listening. In addition, some podcasts allow you to download episodes so you can store them for their period of availability on your device, provided it has enough memory storage. If later you're in an area where, because of a lack of internet access, you're unable to stream content in the ways we've been considering, you're then able to listen to the episode using the downloaded copy instead. Clicking subscribe makes this podcast's episodes feed directly into your choices, and by regularly keeping an eye on the latest episodes added there, you'll be aware of all your subscribed podcasts' future shows at the time they happen. This can be particularly useful if you're not sure when the next episodes will be released. Each podcast hosting platform will have an area with a name something like Listen Here. This is where you can browse to find other listening choices, and the search function helps you locate things you're specifically looking for. What we've described up to this point are functions you might find in a lot of podcast episodes, and we'll return to look at these in more detail when we explore BBC Sounds as our example. I've chosen to use examples from BBC Sounds because, being part of the BBC, it has an amazing store of top quality entertainment and information produced by over 55 of its radio stations. What's more, if you have internet access via a smartphone, tablet or computer, wherever you are in the world, you can listen to whatever you choose from it, whenever you like, without charge. If after you've watched this video you'd like to sign up for BBC Sounds, details of how to do this are given in one of the links below this video. It doesn't cost anything, and I don't benefit financially from these links. I should also add that this video has not been commissioned or authorised by the BBC. I chose to make it because I hope you'll soon be enjoying BBC Sounds as much as I do. Having considered the usual podcast features, let's now explore the extras BBC Sounds offers because of all the professionally produced shows on their many radio stations. Whilst the ways in which we listen to radio have changed massively over this last century, BBC radio stations have consistently produced a wide range of top-quality radio shows. This means that when it comes to providing podcasts, BBC Sounds has an amazing amount of choice available, and to help you quickly benefit from this, towards the end of this video, I'm going to share with you my top podcast picks. In the meantime, to facilitate your finding a way around it, drawing a simple map of BBC Sounds can help with understanding how it works. There are two main areas in BBC Sounds. The first, Listen, is like an audio store where there are lots of display sections you can choose podcasts from for listening to without cost. Each podcast's thumbnail usually has a picture or branding that relates to the content covered in the series of the podcast episodes. The section titles may change and be added to from time to time and might include names such as Essential Listening and Recommended for You. The second area, My Sounds, is your own private area in your account where you receive the latest episodes of the podcast you've subscribed to, along with storing episodes you've bookmarked. Downloads are also kept in My Sounds if you're using the BBC Sounds app on your smartphone, whereas they go straight to your device's Downloads folder if you're downloading on your computer. Each radio show from over 55 national and local BBC radio stations is recorded as a digital audio file and broadcast over the airwaves at its scheduled time for being listened to on conventional radio sets which use DAB or FM. Also, through Listen Live and BBC Sounds, you can hear any of these radio shows whilst they're being broadcast. Additionally, if a show is broadcast at a time that's not convenient for you, having found it in schedules, you can usually listen to the complete show for a set number of days after it's being broadcast. Let's look at this in more detail. Entering BBC Sounds for the first time, you'll find yourself in Listen, and this will be confirmed by its icon being red. Also, the amount of red border around the station's thumbnails in Listen Live provides a quick way of seeing how much of that particular show has already been broadcast. You can make your way around by clicking on Stations, which takes you to a menu with all the BBC's national and local radio stations. Alternatively, using your device's Backpage button to return to Listen Live, You can use the 2 arrows there to scroll across all the national radio shows. Clicking on the thumbnail of the station you've chosen takes you through to the episode of the show that's playing there live, and this is confirmed by the flashing live icon on the right-hand side. As you might have noticed, the screen layout of this live radio show is very similar to the podcast we were looking at earlier, with a few additions, one of which is the pop-up player, which provides a much smaller screen that includes details about any music that's currently playing, such as the song's title and performer's name. Using Backpage, we return to Listen and choose the Schedules option. Clicking on your chosen station leads to a listing of the times of the radio shows with an indication of which one's currently playing, and in this way you arrive at the same episodes page playing live. Earlier I said that many complete radio shows can be listened to for a set number of days after broadcast. So if later on the day of our example we look back, we'll see that the show we were looking at earlier has now completed its broadcast and we can still access it. Using your device's Backpage function enables you to return to the schedule page, where we can choose the different show's episode and look at its website. Not all shows have websites, and where they do, they vary greatly. However, in the one shown here, we can see that the navigation bar provides further options such as video clips and other articles connected with the series. Choosing episodes takes you through to the page of complete shows that can be played, and clicking on your chosen episode leads to more details such as the length of the episode, a listing of the music played in the show, and its availability. Then, by clicking on Listen Now, you can see that in this case it's only available for another 23 hours. Going back to the episodes page, you might have noticed there's an episode without the Listen Now icon. This is because it's gone beyond the time limit for downloading or listening to it. Some radio shows are only available for a limited period of time after broadcast because of rights restrictions. The rights referred to here describe the controls the people involved have over what they've created. Rights issues can affect recordings that contain music, sport, comedy, drama, and readings. In order to broadcast this protected material, radio stations have to be licensed and need to follow strict regulations which, for example, limit the content's availability to a certain length of time after broadcast. In the past, this has meant that the content of many radio shows was then lost to the general public. Fortunately, though, the popularity of podcasts has transformed this. Let's look back at our map to see how this happens. If suitable to become part of a podcast series, the broadcast radio show is modified by removing any parts with rights issues, such as most of the music, sport, comedy, drama, and readings. This then means that the podcast episode's availability is not restricted by the rights of any content that was in the original radio show. Other modifications might involve adding a summary of what's included in the newly formed podcast episode, condensing shows to focus on their highlights, and conversely, adding extra content such as extended interviews. In this way, the Podcasts and Listen include series whose content originates from radio shows, as well as series with content that's never been broadcast on radio. Listen's music mixes are also affected by rights restrictions because each selection of music is only available for a limited period of time. This, however, can be regarded in a beneficial light, as it ensures the wide range of musical choices offered here are regularly varied. Returning to the website we visited and clicking on Podcast, we can see it's just released a new podcast episode. If you choose to, you can bookmark it, and then by going to My Sounds, you'll see it in your bookmarks. Once you've listened to it, if you no longer need that episode, it's a good idea to remove it so that your bookmarks remain a manageable size. Alternatively, if you like the podcast episode you heard, you can subscribe to the podcast. Then, going to My Sounds, you'll find the podcast in your subscribed section, and by looking in latest, you'll see each of that podcast's episodes whenever it's released. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and it's quick and easy to unsubscribe if you decide you no longer want it feeding into your selection of latest episodes. People can find it hard to know where to start when there are so many choices to listen to, and for this reason I'm giving you a list of podcasts I've enjoyed or found interesting. Before I do that, as I'm often asked how I found these, I'm going to share with you what's helped me so that you'll know how to quickly find what interests you. In addition to being able to type keywords into the search function, you can use the categories section in Listen with its View All Categories to steer you in the direction of your choice. For this example, we'll click on Health and Wellbeing, which takes us through to a list of this topic's episodes. When I see one that interests me, I open it and click on Read More. What's written here and the length of the episode determine whether I bookmark it because, having limited free time, I like content that's been well planned and sufficiently edited. By regularly bookmarking shows in this way and keeping an eye on what's landed in latest, I always have lots of podcasts to choose from. When subscribing, it's important to resist feeling that you ought to listen to something because you're subscribed to it. After all, it's unlikely that every episode in a podcast will appeal to you. So, if whilst playing one I decide I don't want to listen anymore, I stop it, remove the bookmark, and move on to the next possibility. Also, if I like what I've listened to, I click on the More Episodes option, as this can be a good source of what's already been released. The link to my Listening Gold podcasts can be found below this video. Lots of the topics I've chosen will be of interest to a wide variety of people. In addition, those of you who've already met me through my Juggling Care online courses will know that I especially like to help people in caring situations improve their everyday lives. And so I've included some extra sections, particularly with this in mind. Whatever your choices, happy listening.